What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're going to talk about episodes. There's a lot of conversation about this from Destiny players right now. Of course, episodes were touted as Bungie's next sort of iteration of the season model, a way of making the game more interesting, improving the cadence of new content dropping in the game, but also improving the quality of season-style content in Destiny. And so here we are in episode 1, and we're kind of coming down from the high of the final shape, right? The quality bar was set so relatively high that in some ways it actually works to highlight even further why seasonal content just hasn't been cutting it for the past year or so in terms of being engaging and interesting. And I guess overall, season content, or episodes as we see it right now, are sort of failing to have that hook that makes players want to get back on Destiny, right? Seasonal content versus something like the final shape highlights that need for the game to feel like, man, I wish I could get on Destiny right now. We should say episodes at the moment are new. We haven't seen all of episode 1 just yet. More of it is on the way. And so I totally do agree with folks who would say, of course, this model is new. We're going to get more activities, more story, and new rewards in the upcoming acts. So it almost certainly isn't fair to sort of write this episode off before we've had the opportunity to witness all of that stuff. And I would add as well, obviously, I'm very hopeful that the content we get in Acts 2 and 3 and the overall bigger picture around this episode will sort of demonstrate the improvements between seasons and episodes in particular. But obviously we can only talk about the conversation we have right now and the content as we see it at the moment. So how are episodes feeling so far? Well, there are a lot of comments in the community about episodes being basically just seasons with more time gating. And in terms of whether that's a fair comment or not, I mean, it kind of is a fair comment. The main differentiation for the moment between episodes and seasons being that there will be a little more content than what we've had previously, in that we get different key activities every 6 weeks, more weapons introduced, more pass ranks, and new artifact mods, and that in theory is great. It's one of the elements of the episode which is positive. We are getting a bit more stuff. However, the content itself, seasonal activities, weekly quest steps, and the quality bar there, so far at best, is essentially the same as seasons. So cutting to the chase, we end up feeling like episodes are seasons, but instead of being better and truly sort of solving the problems that many players have had with seasons, my best way of describing episodes at the moment is that they are seasons rearranged. And if we take the main story quest, for example, every week we have a few steps. We go here, we go there, we find nodes over here, and then we go back to the helm, then we go play the season activity, then go back to the helm again, talk to Osiris in the helm, talk to Osiris again immediately, but do it on the holoprojector, or the radio, or the computer, or whatever it is. It is basically the same core thing, but now, at the moment, it would appear that we get 3 weeks of story, then 3 weeks without story, then 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, 3 on, and 3 off. And in that way, it kind of feels like a normal season, but it's more time-gated. On top of that, in terms of the quality of seasonal storytelling, it is pretty much identical to what we've had in seasonal content, at least in this first third of the episode. And then we get onto the activity content, like Breach Executable, which is a seasonal activity, right? If episode 1 had dropped in the middle of last year after Lightfall, instead of Season of the Deep, for example, it's so similar that I think it would have fitted right in. Having said that, while I know there are some folks that really don't like Breach Executable, I actually don't think it's too bad of a game mode. There are maybe some encounters that feel like they drag on a little bit here and there, but there definitely is some variation between the different encounters that we've seen week over week. Plus there are a handful of different bosses that we can encounter. But I think in a few ways, Bungie have tried to take on board some of the feedback that we've given previously about seasonal activities. And probably overall, most of the criticism comes from the fact that this activity doesn't really break the mold around what we expect to see. And rewards-wise as well, I would say it is pretty rewarding. Bungie have kind of followed a similar path to what we had with the Coil, for example, in Season of the Wish. And we get absolutely loads of weapons dropped, so if you're after good rolls, red borders, stuff like that, and the fact that we can pick up additional exotics from things like Breach and the Enigma Protocol mission, which I actually think is a pretty fun sort of mid-end game activity. Again, I know some folks don't like it, but for me personally, I think the seasonal activities so far are actually alright. You'll have to let us know what you think below though. But again, the good thing for episodes, or some slight redemption here, comes from the fact that we will get a different core activity every 6 weeks. So in 3 weeks time, we get Echo's Battlegrounds, which again sounds like more season-styled content, which it probably will be, but at least it's different to Breach, right? It's not the same thing for the entirety of the 3 months, which again in itself is not a bad thing, but the activity format seems likely to follow the guidelines of what we've had previously. A little side note about episode 1, personal observation here, but in some of the Nessus mission content that we've had this season, we've seen this pretty cool visual rework of Nessus, and the week 3 mission that we've just had is one of the most exciting parts that I've seen of the episode so far, just because it almost felt like we were in a different destination. And it makes me think Bungie could potentially have done something similar to when they brought back Leviathan for Season of the Haunted, which I know wasn't necessarily a popular season, but I think that idea in itself is potentially something that Bungie should pursue and try and do better than they've done previously. Imagine if we'd gotten 2 or 3 of the Nessus core zones reworked in this style, and that's where all of the quests took place. You know, perhaps if it had new secrets, activities, and a little bit of exploration and surprise thrown into the mix. That's the kind of thing that might just start to make seasonal content feel a bit different. So maybe that's a missed opportunity this episode. Let us know what you think. But back to the conversation, episode 1 so far, it's safe to say is not really providing that sense that the game and the quality bar, the content delivery format, and the ability to surprise has really moved forward, and that's what players were hoping for with episode content. Again, it is possible that episode 1 could be a bit more basic than what we might see in episode 2. One argument would be that given perhaps that Bungie saw this as being carried by the final shape to an extent, maybe they decided to put more resources into future episodes. And if that were ultimately to be true, I'd happily accept it, to be honest. I could live with episode 1 not being that insane if it meant those resources went into episode 2 and 3 when those content drops are really going to be needed to continue to engage players. But the counter argument to that would be that this is the debut of episodes, right? And since episodes are supposed to mix things up significantly, surely Bungie would want to demonstrate that front and center in the first release of the year. And thus far, again, it just doesn't seem to be all that different to seasons. So I hope that changes and Bungie surprise us in acts 2 and 3. It is possible, but for most players right now, the feel is that this probably won't be the case. And we've already sort of gotten a sense of what episodes are going to be. Mylan actually posted a video recently talking about this, and he played some clips back from when a couple of the Bungie devs were discussing episodes and the idea behind them and how it was going to push the game forward. So here are a couple of conversation bits from Bungie that I think are worth discussing as well.
We've seen some feedback from the players that the seasonal model has gotten a bit predictable at times, and we just saw in the showcase our content cadence is getting refreshed with this episode model. Can you talk us through what episodes are and how they're going to be different than seasons?
Sure, yeah. So, let's start with sort of what episodes are at their core, right? I think the easiest way to think about episodes is the natural evolution of the seasonal model. Because the seasonal model's done a lot of great things for Destiny. Mm-hmm. I think we've been running seasons for the better part of 3 years at this point, and it has allowed us to deliver really quality experiences at a 3-month, very fast cadence, really move the story forward. I think we've told some great stories, introduced some new activities, new mechanics, really moved everything forward. The problem is, and if we're being honest with ourselves, and I'm going to be honest with ourselves, we really biased towards consistency to do that, right? Like we wanted to deliver it quality. We wanted to deliver it on time, all the time to the player. Mm-hmm. But that made the experience somewhat repetitive. Almost sort of by design in a certain way, which is now, I think, stretched out to the end of its utility. So episodes change up the framework and change up the delivery cadence.
So based on what the devs said there, I think it's fair to say yes, episodes are changing up that delivery cadence. However, in terms of predictability, again, getting a different activity in Act 2, it might change up how the game feels a little bit, but I think in terms of predictability, which they were discussing, at this precise moment at least, the episode feels more or less as predictable as any of the seasonal content, with the exception that we don't know what the next set of activities will actually be like to play. And even then, players are probably already kind of predicting how those things are going to feel, right? Episode echoes Battlegrounds. Sounds very much like some other things we've had in the past. Again, I hope they won't be, but the indication for the moment is that probably they're not going to be anything too different.
These 3 episodes are split into 3 acts each. Okay. And this means 2 things, really. One, that now what you're really looking at is 9 beats a year that are 6 weeks apart. And each of these beats gives us an opportunity to materially change the state of the game, materially move the meta forward, introduce new story, introduce new weapons, new perks, new activities. And it doesn't have to be so formulaic, but it allows us to react more to, what else is going on in the game. It allows us to change up the way we look at content delivery in a way that I think is just strictly better for all of us who are players, right? Like these 6 weeks, the 6 weeks in between major beats, I think is a really good way for players to, play Destiny in where, within their own lifestyle, how it fits into the white space of their life. I think it allows us to to introduce different things, to try some different things. Like I said, make it weird and really start to experiment in a couple of places because of it, not everything has to be there all at once, right at the top.
Then in this section, Bungie spoke about things being kind of formulaic and trying to avoid that with episode content. For the moment, I don't think we're really seeing that again. And there's also the discussion of things not necessarily having to be there immediately right at the top. And I think it's cool that we're getting more artifact perks and we're getting more season pass ranks down the road. But if anything, while it's good to have those things, they are formulaic. And it's the same formula that Bungie have been using for some time. So it's an interesting discussion to have. What do you guys think? How are you feeling about the episode so far? Again, the general sense I'm picking up in the community is that players feel like this is more or less the same as seasons. For me personally, before I write this episode off as just being another season of Destiny, I do want to see what we get in Act 2 and Act 3. I do want to see if that story component kind of accelerates, pushes forward, gets more interesting, and whether having new activities and weapons and things like that introduced kind of makes the game interesting again for a long enough period. I think it's good to give Bungie the benefit of the doubt just a little bit here, but based on the first 3 weeks of episode 1, I think if Bungie are hoping that episodes are going to carry the game forward, be the main format for content delivery, and still simultaneously be able to engage players and keep people in the game, at the moment I'm definitely concerned that that is not going to be the case. But I do have my fingers crossed for the future, both in terms of the rest of this episode, but also episode 2 and 3. And I think now is a good time to be pushing this kind of feedback, because we are still a few months away from episode 2 dropping, and perhaps there's still time where Bungie can take this feedback to kind of adjust and improve the quality of what we might get in episodes later on this year. I don't know whether that's the case, but all we can really do is give Bungie that opportunity. And otherwise, I'm just really hoping we don't end up back in a Season of the Wish level of poor sentiment and almost communal depression. Is that even a term? I don't know. I'm going to be sticking around to find out. I'm still enjoying playing the game at the moment. If anything, my concerns around episodes worry me more for the remainder of this year than they do about what we've got right at this precise moment. So that's kind of what's in the back of my mind at the minute. But give us your thoughts below if you've found the video interesting or stimulating or whatever it may be. A rating also may help us out down below. Also get subscribed if you want to be kept up to date with Destiny content, as I will as always be keeping you posted. But otherwise, cheers for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.